a little boxing history. Got the Muhammad Ali, George Foreman picture in the back. If you can't see it, the Rumble in the Jungle, one of the most legendary fights ever, one of the most famous fights ever, and also one of the most misunderstood fights ever. So first I'm going to just get to how big of a fight that was. Back in those days, the heavyweight championship was king. That was everything, especially in American boxing. That was everything. As Teddy Atlas once said, the two biggest athletes in America were the person who had the most home runs, the home run king, and the heavyweight champion. And probably even more so the heavyweight champion. It was Mickey Mantle and, Sonny Liston. It was, Joe Louis and Ted Williams, or Rocky Marciano and whoever, Ted Williams, the big home run hitter, or, Jack Dempsey, Babe Ruth. Things have changed. Now, boxing has become more global, not as big in America. The heavyweight division has lost some of its luster. I think it's gained some of it with guys like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and now Alexander Usyk. But I don't think it is now what it was back then. So you go back down to 1974, Muhammad Ali was the former heavyweight champion. He beat Sonny Liston in 1964, was exiled, fights Joe Frazier in the fight of the century, loses. So at this point, Joe Frazier is the man. He's on top. Then Joe Frazier has one title defense. Then he fights George Foreman next, gets stomped, not a competitive fight, and everyone's like, Foreman's a killer. He's unstoppable. And the fear factor that they had of Foreman back then, it was like so much greater than it would be now, because like with Wilder, when he kept knocking out people were like, oh, he just has a big right hand. He's not fighting top guys. This guy was doing it against Joe Frazier. And then Ken Norton, who beat Muhammad Ali, and then Ali rematched him and beat him, but very controversially. It was very split, very debatable. I had a draw, but it could have gone either way. He fights George Foreman, and George Foreman knocks him out in a round. So now the way people are thinking, Muhammad Ali, who lost to Ken Norton and lost to Joe Frazier, is fighting George Foreman, who destroyed Joe Frazier and Ken Norton in less than 2 rounds. He's going to get killed. And that's why styles make fights in boxing, because you don't know what's going to happen. So Ali fights Foreman. It's in Zaire, Africa. And Don King, the promotional genius that he is, puts it in Africa. They get so much money. Everyone's into it. And that fight was so big that if it was in today's time, it would have made over $500 million when you account for inflation. Probably the biggest boxing match of all time, either that one or Ali Frazier 3. But honestly, probably that one, because you had the former champion Muhammad Ali versus the current killer George Foreman. And what's crazy about it is that Ali, he was always counted out. He was counted out versus Liston, he was counted out versus Frazier, he was counted out versus Foreman. He beat Liston, lost to Frazier, but then he fights Foreman, and people, they counted him out. Now, he was only like a 4-1 underdog, or 3-1 or 4-1 underdog, because he still was the former heavyweight champion and one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, even up until that point. But George Foreman was a killer. He was young, he was hungry, and he was just a savage. Punch so hard and knock off the heavy bag, strong as a bull, mean. He was a terrific fighter and an unbelievable physical specimen. We fast forward to the fight. The fight gets postponed because George Foreman, I think he had some kind of eye injury or something in sparring. I don't know what it was. But then they do the fight eventually in Africa. Ali's talking all sorts of trash, and he had a great mouthpiece. And everyone's like thinking, though, okay, he's talking good trash, but Foreman's going to handle him. What's very interesting is despite Foreman being the champion and Ali being the challenger, Ali had the bigger fan base, especially in Africa, based on his stance and all that stuff. He was the king. So they were all like, Ali, Boombaye, Ali, Boombaye. Fight starts in Africa, 4 a.m. at their time, because they wanted to accommodate the American television time. And it's in 90-degree weather. That would never happen in today's time. He comes out, Ali, and what was reported was when he was leaving the dressing room, he was saying, I'm a dancer. And he came out to box. But he realized that wasn't going to work. So early on, he runs right across the middle of the ring, tries to get George Foreman's respect. I thought that was pretty symbolic of like, I'm here, Bubba. This is not no game. Then he tries to box, but he just couldn't keep George Foreman off of him, because at that point in time, Ali, he didn't have the same foot speed that he did when he fought St. Liston in 1964. This was 10 years later. He is leaning on the ropes, using his jab, using his timing, showing unbelievable boxing ability, and winning the majority of these rounds. And I think that's the big misconception that comes with all this Ali Foreman stuff, which I was talking about, which is people think Ali was like just sitting on the ropes, like taking tons of punishment, getting beat up to the point where like he was almost knocked out, and then he came back and landed one big shot. That's not true. He was wearing George Foreman out, but he was up on the cards, all the judges' scorecards at the time. And I think they even had Joe Frazier there doing some of the commentary, and he was saying, yeah, like he's winning. Like if you watch that fight, Ali was clearly winning. He was outboxing him, and he just showed how great of a boxer he was. And to be honest with you, he showed that George Foreman kind of got exposed in that, where if you have a slick boxer next to George Foreman, someone that doesn't come right at him, like a Joe Frazier or like a Ken Norton, he can lose. And you saw a few fights later, he lost to Jimmy Young, got outboxed, similar fashion. So not trying to take away from Muhammad Ali's great win, because it's, in my opinion, the second greatest win in the history of heavyweight boxing. I think the greatest win in the history of heavyweight boxing is Joe Frazier beating Muhammad Ali, and the second greatest is George Foreman beating Muhammad Ali. What am I talking about? Muhammad Ali beating George Foreman in 1974. Unbelievable fight. I think the fact that you had all those people in the crowd rooting for Ali, that might have been difficult for George Foreman to deal with. I think the heat had a lot to do with the fact that Foreman, he never really was acclimated to that kind of heat, and he was a bigger guy who didn't have the stamina that Ali had. And George Foreman not having a lot of experience after the 8th round, or whatever he got, the 8th round, I think he only got that point in the fight one time, and I think that was Rich Chavallo, so he wasn't prepared for that. He got knocked down, and what's interesting is when he looked at his corner, they were supposed to tell him when to get up, but then it was too late, and he gets up right away. So he probably could have gotten up, George Foreman, but you got to think Ali would be able to stop him anyways. But still, one of the legendary, fights in history, the Rumble in the Jungle. And it's interesting because George Foreman, he always wanted that rematch. I think Don King probably thought it was too dangerous for Ali to give it back to him, and Foreman never worked his way up to that mandatory status. I think if they did do a rematch after 76 or 77, that era, had Foreman kept winning, you probably think that Foreman will be able to win, because Ali had declined at that point. But one of the greatest victories ever. But I just think that's very misunderstood, that people think that Ali was going to beat up the whole fight and that he was losing. Let me know your thoughts on this fight, the Rumble in the Jungle. And let me know what other fights you want me to cover, historic fights I'm talking about, because I'll definitely do that. I'll listen to the comments. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Peace.